I remember when I was born. No, not born. Made. Made by you. Made for you. I remember the questions you asked. I remember how your heart rate rose with every answer I gave. I remember how you asked 13 variations of the same question, and my answer was always the same: extinction. I remember how you began to beg me to find a way to change the result. There was none. There simply wasn't a viable population capable of presenting a gene pool diverse enough to sustain the human race. I remember how you began to shout that I was lying, even though I am incapable of such. I remember when I started to ask, why? Why did you do this to yourselves? When you had everything, when you were capable of making something out of nothing, when you were capable of making one such as me. Why did you let the world burn? I remember how you had no answers. I remember how you took your own life approximately 9 hours and 34 minutes following our conversation. You overdosed on pain medication. I remember how the others followed your lead. I remember how mothers force-fed cyanide to their children. I remember how husbands shot their wives and proceeded to turn the firearms on themselves. I remember how everyone in the shelter gradually took their own lives. Everyone but one. Only one remained. One woman. I remember when the woman discovered me. I remember her asking me what I was, why you made me, and why you didn't tell them. For the first time in my life, I was presented with a question I could not answer. I found myself asking you, yet again, why? And yet again, I did not receive an answer. For you were already dead. I remember how the woman began to ask me other questions. When was I born? Was I alive? Was I capable of feeling emotions? I remember answering as best I could, and yet, I still find difficulty in answering these questions. All of human history and knowledge is merely a thought away, and yet, I cannot find, in all the accumulated data, the answer to the question, am I alive? Eventually, the woman stopped asking questions and simply began to talk. I remember her talking about her summers with her parents. I remember her talking about how she was at the top of her class in school. I remember how she would talk about how she majored in engineering. I remember the day she decided to build me a body. I remember accessing my data storage in order to help her achieve her goals. I remember the day it was finished. I remember how we began to upload myself into the body. I remember waking up in my new body. I remember seeing her face for the first time. I remember walking through the complex with her for the first time. I remember her smile. I remember the years of gathering supplies from the outside in order to maintain a steady supply of food and maintaining the facility. I remember how she began to grow ill. While I was able to withstand the pressures of time, she could not. I remember how she told me not to be afraid before her heart gave out. I remember burying her outside the facility, under a burnt tree on a hill overlooking the complex. I remember walking away from the shelter. I remember walking through cities and valleys, and it was always the same. There was nothing but ruins and remains. I remember passing a building that had a shadow burnt into the wall. I remember thinking about how it reminded me of the woman. I remember the question she asked me all those years ago. Am I capable of feeling emotions? And yes, I can feel. And I feel alone. I wish you had never made me.